There's a neurosurgeon in Atlanta earning $450,000 a year. He can explain the blood-brain barrier in detail. He can operate on a human brain for 6 hours without a break. He has published research. He has letters after his name. He also has $11,000 in credit card debt, no emergency fund, and hasn't looked at his retirement account in 3 years. He's not an outlier. He is the rule. Here's what most financial advice gets completely wrong. It assumes that if you understand money, you'll handle it correctly, that knowledge plus intelligence equals good decisions, that if someone just explained compound interest one more time or showed the right spreadsheet or gave the right tip, the behavior would change. It doesn't work that way. Financial psychology researchers have known for decades that cognitive ability and financial decision-making are almost entirely uncorrelated. The same brain that aces standardized tests, wins arguments, and solves complex problems will also hold on to a losing investment, skip retirement contributions to buy something it doesn't need, and convince itself that this time the math works out differently. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why that happens. Not just the surface-level "you overspend" explanation, the actual mechanisms, the specific ways your brain is wired against your financial interests, and what to do about each one. Let's start with what the research actually shows. A 2023 study published in the Journal of Financial Literacy examined the relationship between cognitive ability and financial decision-making across a large sample of adults. The finding was uncomfortable. Higher cognitive ability predicted slightly better financial knowledge, but it had almost no predictive power over actual financial behavior. People who scored highest on reasoning tests were just as likely to carry credit card balances, fail to invest, and make emotional decisions during market downturns as people who scored lower. Knowing the right answer and doing the right thing are two different cognitive systems, and the second system is where most of us have a serious problem. This is the core insight behind behavioral finance, a field that came out of work by psychologists Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky. Their research showed that humans don't make financial decisions the way textbooks assume. We don't calculate expected utility and pick the rational option. We use mental shortcuts. We feel losses more than gains, and we're heavily influenced by how a choice is framed. These aren't personality flaws. They're structural. They show up the same way across cultures, income levels, and education backgrounds. Smart people aren't exempt. In some cases, they're more exposed, because intelligence gives you better tools to justify the irrational thing you already wanted to do. Let me walk you through the 5 specific mechanisms. Pay attention to which ones you recognize in yourself. Bias number 1 is overconfidence, and high achievers are especially vulnerable to it. Overconfidence in finance shows up in a specific pattern. The more competent you are in one domain, the more you assume that competence transfers to adjacent ones. A successful doctor assumes they'll be good at picking stocks. A sharp business analyst assumes they can time the market. A high-achieving professional assumes their financial intuitions are reliable. They're usually not. A 2024 study from the Journal of Behavioral Finance found that investors who scored highest on financial knowledge tests were more likely to actively trade their portfolios and more likely to underperform a simple index fund as a result. The knowledge made them more confident in their ability to beat the market. The confidence cost the money. James Montier, a behavioral finance researcher, tracked fund managers over several years and found that 74% of them believed their investment performance was above average. Mathematically, most of them were wrong, but the belief was real, and it drove decisions. This is why the smartest person in the room often invests worse than someone who just puts money into an index fund and ignores it. They know enough to feel confident. They don't know enough to know how much they're missing. The fix isn't to doubt yourself into paralysis. It's to recognize which decisions genuinely benefit from your intelligence and which ones don't. Picking individual stocks and timing the market are 2 areas where research consistently shows that almost nobody beats a passive approach over the long run, not because the investors are stupid, but because the market is already priced for smart people. Bias number 2 is present bias. This one is probably the most expensive bias most people have never heard of. Present bias is the tendency to overvalue things available now and undervalue things that are available later, even when the math clearly favors waiting. The classic research example: if you offer people $100 today or $110 in a week, most people take $100 today. That's a 10% return in 7 days, which annualized is one of the best investment returns in history. The rational move is obvious. People still take the money now. The same mechanism plays out every day in financial decisions. Your retirement account gets contributions when there's money left over, which usually means never. The emergency fund stays half-funded because the present cost of building it feels more real than the future benefit of having it. The credit card balance carries forward for one more month because paying it off in full right now means going without something you want right now. Present bias isn't laziness, it's a feature of how the brain processes time. Future rewards are processed in a part of the brain associated with abstract thinking. Present rewards activate the parts associated with immediate emotion. When those two systems compete, emotion usually wins. High earners get hit especially hard with this one. A person earning $40,000 who wants something for $200 has a visible, concrete constraint. A person earning $200,000 who wants the same thing just puts it on the card. The friction that would have forced a pause doesn't exist. The purchase is easy. The future cost of that habit, compounded over years, is invisible. The fix is to remove the decision from the moment entirely. Automatic transfers to retirement accounts and savings before the paycheck hits your spending account. When the money never appears in your checking balance, present bias has nothing to work with. The decision is already made. Bias number 3, the sunk cost fallacy. Here's one where being smart genuinely makes things worse. The sunk cost fallacy is continuing to pour resources into something because of what you've already invested, not because of what you'll get in return. You hold the losing stock because selling means admitting the loss is real. You stay in the expensive apartment because you've already spent so much on furnishing it. You keep a subscription you don't use because canceling feels like wasting what you already paid. The rational move in all of these cases is to evaluate the decision based only on what happens from this point forward. The money already spent is gone either way. It's irrelevant. But your brain doesn't process it that way. Kahneman and Tversky's work showed that the pain of a loss is roughly twice as intense as the pleasure of an equivalent gain. Selling an investment at a loss triggers that loss pain, so your brain treats not selling as a way to avoid the pain, even though the financial position is identical. Smart people are worse at this for a specific reason. They're better at constructing justifications. A less analytical person might simply admit, "I made a mistake." A highly analytical person will build a case for why the original decision was actually correct, why the situation will eventually turn around, why this time is different. The same intelligence that makes them good at their job makes them better at rationalizing bad financial decisions. The practical fix is to separate evaluation from ego. When assessing whether to continue something, an investment, a subscription, a financial commitment, ask one question only. If I were starting fresh today with no prior history here, would I choose this? If the answer is no, the sunk cost is doing the work, not your actual judgment. Bias number 4, status spending. This one is quieter than the others. Most people who do it don't recognize it as a financial pattern. Status spending is purchasing things not for the utility they provide, but for what ownership communicates to others or to yourself. The car that's $30,000 more expensive than the one that would get you everywhere you need to go. The watch that tells the same time. The neighborhood where the median home price is significantly higher than what you'd need for a comfortable life. The vacations you photograph and post before you've had a chance to enjoy them. None of this is irrational in a human sense. Humans are deeply social. We evolved in environments where social status directly affected survival. The brain that tracks status is doing exactly what it was built to do. The problem is that the financial cost of status spending at a high income level is enormous, and the return is usually shorter than people expect. Research from the University of British Columbia found that status goods provide a temporary emotional boost that fades within weeks to months. The BMW stops feeling special, the watch becomes normal, the neighborhood becomes just where you live, and then the brain goes looking for the next thing. Meanwhile, the financial effect is permanent. That extra $30,000 on a car repeated across vehicles over a career is several $100,000 in retirement wealth. Not because the purchase was wrong in some moral sense, but because the ongoing pattern, automated by the brain's need for status signals, compounds in the wrong direction. The fix isn't to stop spending on things you enjoy, it's to be honest with yourself about why you're buying something. Utility and status are both valid reasons, but knowing which one is driving the decision lets you ask whether the cost is proportional to the return. Bias number 5, analysis paralysis. The last one is specific to high information people, and it's the most ironic one in this list. Analysis paralysis is the tendency to delay decisions, sometimes indefinitely, when the number of options or the complexity of information exceeds a threshold the brain finds comfortable. In financial decisions, this shows up as spending months researching which brokerage to use before opening an account, never starting contributions because you're still figuring out whether a Roth IRA or a traditional IRA is better for your situation, not investing because the market might crash and you want to wait for more clarity. The cruel irony is that in investing, inaction is itself a decision. It has a cost. Every month of delay at 35 is a month of compounding lost. Waiting for the perfect moment to start is mathematically worse than starting imperfectly. Barry Schwartz wrote about this in The Paradox of Choice. More options don't make people happier or more effective. They make them less likely to decide and more likely to feel bad about whatever they eventually choose. Smart people hit this trap harder because they know enough to identify every potential downside of every option. They can see the ways each choice might go wrong. That risk awareness, which is genuinely useful in many areas of life, becomes a barrier when it prevents any decision from being made at all. The fix is to accept good enough, not in a defeatist way, in a mathematical one. A person who opens a retirement account at 35 with whatever fund is available and starts contributing immediately will significantly outperform a person who spent 2 years researching the optimal allocation and started at 37. The compounding advantage of starting early beats the optimization advantage of starting right every time. The override framework. Here's what these 5 biases have in common. They all operate below the level of conscious analysis. They're not things you think your way through in the moment. They're automated responses that feel like reasoning. That's why knowing about them isn't enough. Understanding present bias doesn't stop you from spending what's in your checking account. Knowing the sunk cost fallacy is real doesn't automatically make you sell the losing position. What actually works is system design, removing the decisions from the moment and building structures that make the right behavior the default. Automate savings before you see the money. Set a rule that you evaluate investments based on forward value only, not what you paid. Decide in advance what your enough looks like for major spending categories so the brain's status seeking has a defined ceiling. When you find yourself paralyzed by options, impose a deadline. You'll make a decision by a specific date with the best information available then. None of these are complicated. That's the point. Complicated systems get abandoned when life gets busy. Simple systems that remove the need for in-the-moment decisions work because they don't rely on your willpower or your intelligence to function. The neurosurgeon in Atlanta doesn't have a knowledge problem, he has a system problem. His financial behavior is running on default settings, while his professional life runs on highly optimized ones. The gap between those 2 tracks is where the money goes. Picture yourself 5 years from now. In one version, you're still doing the same things, overconfident in a few areas, spending slightly ahead of what you earn, holding on to decisions longer than the math supports, running on financial autopilot while telling yourself you'll sort it out when things calm down. In the other version, you built a few simple structures, automatic contributions, a personal rule about how you evaluate investments, a defined ceiling for status spending, a deadline rule when you feel the pull of analysis paralysis. The intelligence you already have pointed in a more useful direction. The decisions between those two versions aren't dramatic, they're small. But small decisions made consistently compound just like money does. The smartest financial move you can make is understanding that your brain is the variable, not your income, not the market, not your circumstances, and then building a system that works with that brain instead of against it.